So he stays at Manchester United, Bruno Fernandes, and Danny, you said in your column, and I read it, it was, quotes, imperative that he stayed at Manchester United. Says you, for me it's a no-brainer. It's simply imperative he stays. I'd go as far as to suggest if he were to kick off next season in Saudi Arabia instead of Old Trafford, the consequences will be devastating and Amorim will face another season of struggle. So, I mean, you laid it down, Danny. He's got to stay, and he has stayed. Now, Simon, here's the thing. Bruno Fernandes, on duty with Portugal last night, kind of convened his own news conference. Spoke in Portuguese when it came to talking about Manchester United, but interpreted, it says, Manchester United said they didn't want to sell me. They said if I wanted to go, I could, but they didn't need the money. I spoke to Amorim throughout the period, and he was pushing for me not to go. But the line there, they said if I wanted to go, I could, but they didn't need the money. So what's all this about redundancies and laying off people?
I saw that interview, and the first thing I thought to myself was, how is the president of that football club called that player directly and had the ability to do it? Because I thought there was certain governance that prohibited from that sort of stuff, and it seems to be that there isn't any governance anymore. In fact, you can broadcast the fact that you can talk to players whenever you feel like it, whenever you're under contract. That doesn't seem quite right to me, although I do believe the tapping up was nonsense. But there is some sort of protocol. I don't think it's absolutely appropriate for another football club owner to be phoning direct to players under contract with another football club.
Isn't it a bit like the boxing? Where the Saudi guys, they can do what they want and they do.
Well, that's kind of the point I'm making. To some extent. Yeah. The other side of the equation, financially, look, there is no doubt that Manchester United need some cash. Not just because they want some cash to be able to buy other players with, but because they will certainly have some PSR challenges. The question is, do they want to sell Bruno Fernandes to achieve the funding, financing or PSR contribution that they need, when they can look around and say, well, I can get rid of Rashford if I work hard at this, and there's a £40 million profit in that because he's an academy player. I can get Sancho off the books. If I can get Sancho out for 50 million quid, then I can make another 30 million quid there because we're only carrying him on our balance sheet at 20 million quid because he's depreciated over 3 years from the 75 million pounds we bought him for. Can I get some dough out of the XYZ player over here? So it might just simply be that United look at it and go, we don't want to sell you. And also, I have to say, I don't believe the numbers. I don't believe that they were going to offer 100 million for Bruno Fernandes, and I don't believe they're going to offer him 700 grand a week.
No. Well, you're right. The Saudis said yesterday the numbers were exaggerated. But that apart, though, Simon, this comes off the back of these redundancies, and I know we've been over this time and time again, but Manchester United told me they didn't need the money. That's a standout line.
But you must also not conflate the methodology of making people redundant against just financial savings. There is an element of that, but also if you're carrying a lot of inefficiency in a business and a lot of fat and you don't need it, any guy that comes into a business and looks around and goes, right, well, why are we so bloated? Why have we got so many people doing so many jobs and they're not being particularly effective in it? Well, I would rather tighten this up, make it a lean and more efficient machine. So yes, of course, in the longer game, it will save you money. In the shorter term, if you're making redundancies, you're having to pony up payments to people, so your cash flow is actually being prohibited or impacted upon by making redundancies. So whilst Jim Ratcliffe peddled this yarn, and believe me, it was a yarn. Right? To such extent.
By the end of 2025, with the club running out of cash.
But that, to me, I mean, I said it the other day and I wrote it in the newspaper, there is an obligation upon listed businesses to represent themselves properly. He may not be a director at Manchester United, but he's a person of significant interest. And making claims like that about a listed security, saying it's potentially going to run out of money, when it actually themselves provided their own financial statement saying they had 95 million in cash, strikes me as very strange as to why someone hasn't complained to the New York Stock Exchange about a listed security being influenced by seemingly inaccurate information. Maybe that's just football. Maybe football gets away with doing whatever it wants. But I certainly don't think that they're short of cash or the opportunity to provide cash, because they've got 3 billionaires sitting in their boardrooms.
Yeah, exactly.
The reality is that the big thing, and what Stefan Borson pointed to, is they've got a PSR problem. They categorically will have a PSR problem. They won't be able to comply with PSR because they've got massive swathes of revenue coming out of their income models. And so they won't be able to do it. So they'll have to sell players to achieve that.
Well, especially the rumours around people like Garnacho and Mainu being their own academy players. That's going to help them, isn't it? Because it's all profit.
Yeah. I mean, is Garnacho all profit?
Yeah.
Well, then ultimately, there's your answer. If you sell Garnacho for 60 million quid, which they can achieve all day, if you can find a way to work a deal where Rashford goes out for 25, 30, 40 million quid, there's 100 million in straight to bottom line profit transfer.
Danny, on the fact that Bruno stays, as he virtually immortalised himself in the eyes of the United fans, I do agree with Simon. We got information yesterday that the Saudi figures were exaggerated, but that said, we're still talking tens of millions of a bid.
Well, I think it strengthens the bond between him and the fans. Yeah, definitely. I think he's also, it's like a breath of fresh air for football in some respects. I think a lot of people look at it from afar who don't care about United and think, well done. You know, good to see someone wanting to stay at the top level and play and compete.
Yeah. Emmanuel Petit said exactly that yesterday.
The big problem United have if he went is you can't attract a player of his quality to United at the moment because he's that good. That's the big problem.
But also lessons are being learned. One of the things about the tax efficiency of Saudi is you have to be there for 3 years to be able to find yourself in a situation, I think it's 3, you have to find yourself in a situation where you become net. So they've seen them. They're watching players now. They're coming back. Players are going over there, not liking it, and coming back. The latest potential candidate for that is Mitrovic, who, left Fulham.
He's done 2 years, though, hasn't he, nearly?
Yeah, but the point is that they're coming back. So, I didn't never believe the 700 grand salary. So if you're getting paid 200-300 grand a week at Manchester United and you're being offered 300-500 grand at Saudi and you've got to stay there for a period of time to achieve the tax mitigation side of things, all of a sudden it's not quite the draw that you think it is.
Right. One big question this morning, and I'll get to that. What is next for Jadon Sancho? Because Chelsea have said thanks, but no thanks, and he's heading back to Manchester United. So there's another situation for United on the horizon. But on Bruno Fernandes, I mean, Danny said it. It is imperative he stays, so he has stayed. So do you salute Bruno Fernandes this morning for saying no to a huge money move to Saudi Arabia? And if not, why not? Because he's spoken about it last night in Portugal and he stays put. How much of a boost is that for you going into next season?
I saw Scholesy say that they should sell him. That was interesting. Scholesy was saying that if you get 100 million for Bruno, I'd take it.
Really?
Yeah, okay. I was surprised at that because, the replacing of Bruno, I don't see how they do it.
We put it out there. Bruno Fernandes stays at Manchester United. Alex Crook broke the news yesterday. Everybody else followed. But many millions were bid by one of the Saudi clubs. But he's not going. And he had a press conference last night to say why he's not going. And he even said last night, they said to me, if I wanted to go, I could. But that Manchester United didn't need the money. Really? Simon is putting that into more perspective for me this morning. But what do you as United fans think of what Bruno has done? Hassan is a big United fan. Good morning, Hassan. What's your take on all of this?
Oh, good morning, Jim. Good morning, Simon. Good morning, Danny.
Good morning, mate.
Good morning. I just wanted to obviously say, I think, by Bruno staying, it hopefully sets the tone right for the season. I think obviously Cunha, possibly Mbeumo coming in, I think that'll set the tone. Better maybe players to come in, play in the Amorim system, give Amorim the time to obviously grow the team and ultimately develop it and hopefully get the culture right with the team. Because I think, like what we're hearing in pre-season, what Garnacho, Ahmad, all these players are coming out and doing. Sancho, Rashford, if they come back or not sure. But, hopefully, Ineos, they give them a bit of time, to hopefully steady that ship and, bring the footballing side to it.
Hassan, that's a word that we hear more and more, isn't it, Simon? Do we not, Danny? Getting the culture right. The culture right. Where's your head with that?
Well, discipline is more of a word I'd use. A manager sets it up and gets good players around who carry it on. Yeah, it's discipline,
values, respect.
Yeah, work ethic.
Yes,
culture. It's a bit generic. I mean, really, really, really single-minded. A
culture is a catch-all, though, isn't it? Underneath culture is discipline, is respect, is values. Maybe. So it catches it all.
Yeah.
To getting the culture right is not necessarily wrong. It's about what underpins that culture. Yeah. So underpinning it is standards, disciplines, motivations, work ethic, all the things that Danny will know better than I will about what you expect your players to understand. And certainly in a club like Man United, where the culture of that football club has been based upon a mentality of achieving things and winning things and reminding themselves of who they play for.
My concern for them is the manager's through the door, and when the manager first goes through the door, he's got like a blank canvas to implement that culture and really try and stamp his authority. And I've not seen a group of players on board with it.
Really?
They don't look comfortable playing that system. Some of their body language, they don't want to play it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's mixed the team up so much. You see players frustrated, confused.
Yeah.
Honestly, I there's a hell of a lot of work to do there.
Tony's another United. Hassan, thank you. Tony's another United fan waiting to speak to us. I mean, getting the culture right. But you heard Danny there moments ago, Tony. There's a heck of a lot to work upon in this close season. He's right, isn't he, Tony? The very fact that Bruno stays is one thing, but there's so much else to be done. Good morning, Tony.
Hello.
Hi, Tony. You with us?
Hello.
He's kind of with us, not with us. We'll get back to you, Tony. CJ, good morning to you.
Hello, how are you guys?
All good?
Very good.
Good.
The culture, there's a lot to be done, is there?
Yeah, lots to be done. I'm glad Bruno Fernandes is staying. I reckon he's had a very good think about it and turned round and thought, I cannot leave Manchester United in the state it's in.
Yeah.
I think that's got a lot to do with it. I'm hoping the culture will change. A lot of these players think because they play for Manchester United, they can do what they want and turn up when they want. And I think quite a few players need to go. The likes of Rashford, Garnacho, and a few others. And hopefully the future's going to look a wee bit better.
Yeah. But this proves to you, does it, that Bruno's got the club in his heart?
Oh, absolutely, because I don't think Bruno's a selfish type of person. I mean, just going back, I think he likes to help. I think he likes to get stuck in, and that's what we need.
Yeah. CJ, thank you for that. I mean, at the end of the day, he's gone about it in quite a crafty way, hasn't he? He gets himself together with the Portugal squad, sits down, and then gives his reasons as to why he stayed and why he said no to the Saudis. It's worked out nicely for Bruno. But to be fair to him, you could also say he's done it very professionally.
Well, I always judge players what they do on the pitch, not what comes out of their mouth, really. And on the pitch this season, he's shown up. So many times I've watched him, and he's been the one trying, carrying them, but taking risks, getting on the ball. Yes, the theatrics, the petulance.
Less of that, though, isn't there?
There is less. But I think there'd be less if he was around better players and winning games.
Yeah.
It's just that I see him so frustrated at the others not being on his...
But you haven't liked that at the same time. You've been critical of his demeanour now and again.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
It's frustrated you.
But now, this season, because it got so bad, and it was the worst United I've ever seen, I think, in my time, and he stood up, and it was refreshing, surprising, that he just kept his levels. And if anything, he bettered his levels because everyone else was dropping theirs. And Simon makes a good point. I think the theatrical stuff, the petulance...
I also think that we're creating false equivalencies. I mean, he will be afforded and lauded, and if everyone wants to be sentimental about it, and that's fine. But I don't want to pop people's bubble and bring them crashing back down to earth. But maybe the offer didn't suit Bruno Fernandes. Maybe if someone of more significance, footballing terms, had come in, like one of the top Spanish sides, we'd be having a very different conversation now. Yeah. He has stayed, and whether he's here in a year's time, we will see. Whether he's going to be a massive part of a rebuild. And you find these things really change courses all of a sudden when you least expect it. Halfway through the season, you suddenly find Bruno Fernandes is not quite the leader or the player that you thought he was going to be, and the whole dynamic has changed.
He'll be fine. At the United, if they get Bruno through the door, Cunha and Bruno...
Yeah.
There's a lot of creativity there. That's going to help them with the goals because they've been. The other problem is they concede so many.
Do you look at these purchases? Do these? I mean, I know I'm guilty of falling into a trap that all of us fall into. Do these feel like Manchester United signings?
Well, if you buy,
it's a good question.
When did Fergie buy players from Brentford or Wolves? I suppose you could ask. Yeah. Well, saying that he always went and bought Tottenham's best players, didn't he? Generally, Berbatov, Carrick, all those types. But I Rio Ferdinand from Leeds.
Yeah, but Leeds were
flying at the time.
Weren't they?
Yeah. I know what you mean. I think
these don't with due respect to these players, they're good players. These don't tell me that these are top four players that are going to catch up. Maybe they are top four players in a top four side, but Man United aren't a top four side.
I think Mateus Cunha could potentially be really good. We talked about his work ethic, I think, last week, so we'll have to wait and see on his attitude. In Bruno, this season has surprised me. I mean, what's he got? 20-plus goals, which is some going at any level. And I wasn't sure he had that consistency. He stepped up. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I know what you mean in terms of we've expected United for years to go and get the best in class, whether it be Varane or Berbatov, whoever, you know. But they're not there. You can only shop where you can afford and attract the type of players who are in the position you're in. They've done well getting Cunha.
We spoke at the top of the show today, Danny, briefly about Simon's documentary that's coming out, and it's very much on the sport versus money theme. Simon, even you must raise an eyebrow these days when you hear what's going on. So 5 years ago, Jadon Sancho had his pick of Europe's top clubs. He hadn't even turned 20. And he registered 17 goals and 16 assists for Borussia Dortmund in the Bundesliga. It seems like a long time ago now. So now we know what's happened. He's been at Manchester United, didn't work out there. Now he's been at Chelsea on loan. Now Chelsea have opted not to sign Sancho on a permanent basis and will instead pay a £5 million penalty to send him back to Manchester United.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if Chelsea were giving it the big one about perhaps signing him at the beginning of the season, then what United have done is put him on an index, saying, okay, well, we're going to commit you to something. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, then you're going to have to pay not to do it. So I just think it's a constructive a deal that the market has gotten wise to people saying they're going to do one thing and then potentially doing another.
And then also, if they'd have paid a $5 million loan fee at the beginning, people would have just...
I mean, we were discussing. I mean, I'm not a fan of Sancho's.
Why?
Because listen, the optics of what he does and doesn't do, I don't like. I don't like the fact that he behaved the way he did. I know Ten Hag could make some ridiculous observations, and we were very critical of him. But clearly, the boy, when he had his challenges, when he was dealing with some issues that were obviously psychologically based, or so we're led to believe, he went out to Holland. Now, that could only been introduced and instigated by Ten Hag, because that's the only link there. He's a Dutchman, sent him so, and the player's response to that is to behave the way he did towards Ten Hag because he didn't like something Ten Hag had said or done. Then you look at the history of this player. He's got a history of being, I think, unprofessional in the terms of not turning up to England camps on in a timely fashion, doing the same at Dortmund. It's been endured. And all of a sudden, Man United have paid 75 million quid for a player, whether they bought a pup or not. He hasn't done what he should do.
Right.
He's gone out in social media, had his little bite back about what he thinks he's entitled to say because he's been pulled up for his shortcomings, goes to Chelsea, flatters to deceive at Chelsea again, and out he goes. And now what he'll probably do, this is the point myself and Danny were talking about, is he's on the last year of his contract. So his rewards will be to wind this contract down, because he doesn't seem to care that much about his England career, wind this contract down and have it all land in his pay packet at the end of the contract, because no one will have to pay a fee for him.
I think
what a wonderful world that is.
But if I look at it a bit differently, I mean, I'd like to think people evolve, players, young players especially, and you've got to give them time to. He's made mistakes, I agree. But I actually think he's done all right this season for Chelsea when I've seen him. He's got his technical ability is brilliant. Very rarely gives the ball away. Now, he could end product is a question. Well, it's a question mark over all Chelsea's wide players this season. Let's get that right. But he's played in a lot of the big games, and that's because he's reliable with the ball and he knows his job. He's a bright footballer. Now, he turned up at Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, when he was 20. And because they paid a huge amount for him, which was inflated,
right,
he was expected to hit the world.
That's not his fault.
Not his fault, no.
Didn't they buy him in 2022? Hasn't he been there 3 years?
He's been there. This is his 4th year, a 5-year deal.
Right, so he's 25 now. So he turned up when he was 21.
They bought him in 2021, Manchester United. They're 73 million quid.
Yeah.
But now the crazy aspect of all of this is that Chelsea had agreed an obligation to buy Sancho for a fee of 25 million. If they finished higher than 14th in the Premier League, which they did, or pay their way out the deal.
Yeah, but they might have another winger in mind. I think Jadon Sancho, if you can forget the wages for a second, from a footballing perspective, for 25 million is good value. Really good value.
You're having him big time, right?
Well, I'm having him. Not big. There's better players than him.
Yeah,
there's more
in today's marketplace.
His numbers in his career are 1 in 4, right, for a winger.
Sling him back to Germany, and if they're prepared to pay 25 million quid, he excels in that football. Let him go there. But the bottom line is that it's a strange deal, isn't it? You paid 25. You have an obligation to buy it for 25 million quid. So that should be the only obligation. End of discussion. Because that 25 million quid number would have meant something.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I would suspect, if you look at the fact that he's a 75 million pound player, depreciating X amount per year, the fact that they put him at 25 million quid means that probably Man United covered their nut and made some money out of it. The fact that they can get him out for 20 million now and have a 5 million pound kicker from Chelsea probably still means he's a 25 million pound player, and it still adds up the same way. They can afford to sell him for 20 million quid because they've got a 5 million kicker from Chelsea, and it makes the deal doable because someone's got to take these outlandish wages that he hasn't earned.
Well, even if
and
he
doesn't deserve.
But
I mean, 300 grand a week.
He doesn't deserve it.
Yeah,
300,000 a week, reportedly.
He doesn't deserve it, Danny. He doesn't deserve 300 grand a week.
No, but let's say he gets...
Do you think he deserves that?
No. Let's say he gets 25 million.
Has he earned it?
Well, no, you don't view it. No, because then he would deserve it.
He's earned it because they gave it to him.
Oh, yeah, but he
didn't deserve, but he doesn't deserve it because he hasn't provided his side of the bargain.
Yeah, but let's say they get 25, which I think they could easily do.
Yeah.
Someone will take him for 25 if he lessens the wages. Now, is he going to, for 1 year, lessen his wages? Probably not. So the 5 million that comes in from Chelsea, they could just give him that to go, couldn't they? That's going to take some of it.
Yeah. I mean, from a pragmatic solution point of view, that burns my backside.
I know it does.
Because I think he should get what he precisely.
But if I'm at United, I'm thinking we need to move on from people like Sancho and Rashford. Then we need fresh. So if Sancho's, I think they get 25 all day for him. Someone will pay 25 for him, definitely.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't need to subsidise his wages on that.
Well, because they're going to have
to. Maybe they do, or maybe they don't. He's not a £25 million player. In the market, he is in talent terms, right? But in the market terms, people pay inflated prices for players.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that they, if he was on 100 grand a week, they'd get 40 million quid for him.
Maybe, yeah.
Right? So somebody got to get a balance between getting more money for him to be able to help them with their PSR problems, give them a little bit more cash towards that. At the same time as accepting the fact that he's going to demand expansive salaries, not having earned them.
Right. And to back that up, someone who's in the know to a degree has got in touch with me saying Chelsea wanted Sancho to stay, but he had to take a pay cut, and he didn't want to do that.
Yeah. No, he doesn't want to take a pay cut.
Yeah, but the fact they wanted him to stay, if that's true, and that sounds right to me, which is wrong on the player to not think, you know what, I'm here.
What's he going to do now, Danny?
Well, he'll find a club. Look, Jim, he's a clever footballer, honestly. Really clever. Now, because he doesn't play to the level we've seen he's capable of in Dortmund, that's a different question on attitude coach. I think this season for Chelsea...
Has he really shown that recently?
I think he's done
he scored a great goal the other day, didn't he?
No, forget that. When you watch Chelsea play in the big games and he played, he's done all right. Now, we tend to do this thing, and I do it as well, where you're judging forward players on numbers all the time. But he's so reliable with the ball. And he is... Maresca has done something well this year. He has got him taking players on more than he did at United. Yeah. Because his chances created is higher in terms of assists are higher than last season, which wouldn't be that difficult because he didn't hardly play last season, so that's fair. But he has looked more confident this season. He's looked a bit more like himself. Will he ever reach the heights with Dortmund? Who knows? But for 25 million quid, you don't get better players than Jadon Sancho.
Okay, we're about to your knowledge there,
that 25 million quid, given that United paid 75 million quid for him, does not include them subsidising his wages. So the 5 million
quid... have to.
But the point is,
you're going to sit there.
The reasons why they're prepared to let him go for 25 million quid is someone's got to pick up his wages. Because if they've paid 75 million quid for a footballer, they're still going to want to get some. They're still going to say there's a market for him at 50 million quid. And the reason why there isn't a market for him at 50 million quid is because this little sod wants 300 grand a week.
But you've got wage structures.
So we'll take the pill. We'll accept that we can't get 50 million quid for him because he wants 300 grand a week. So we'll take 25 million quid, but you've got to pick his wages up because you're getting a discount on him in the first place.
Do you get enough from him, Danny? 5 goals and 10 assists in 42 games for Chelsea.
That's not impressive, is it?
It's similar to numbers of a lot of other wingers at the big clubs. I'd want more.
Right.
Because he's capable of more.
Bit of concerning news for Crystal Palace fans at the moment. Now, Simon put this into perspective yesterday for us, but it's continuing to sound alarm bells for certain Palace fans. Because John Textor is looking to sell his majority stake in Crystal Palace as the club reportedly is desperate to try and avoid being booted out of a European competition. Now, we know that Crystal Palace, in beating Manchester City and winning the FA Cup, have got themselves into the Europa League. But 2-1 won't go. Textor also owns Lyon, the French club Lyon, who are also in the Europa League, and UEFA rules stop 2 clubs with common ownership from participating in the same competition. So there's a bit of consternation here, and that's why a Palace delegation flew to Switzerland yesterday to get themselves in front of UEFA to try and sort this thing out. Now, just before we came on air, Mike Keegan, very good journalist, chief sports reporter for the Daily Mail, was also out there as Crystal Palace arrived in Switzerland, and he spoke to me when they arrived for those crunch talks with UEFA. And this is what Mike witnessed.
It went on for a lot longer than they thought it was going to do, Jim, and it's difficult in these things. You don't want to take too much from things that might not be relevant, but I thought that was quite telling. They were in there for about 2 hours, when I think everybody was expecting it to take about an hour. I managed to get John Textor on his way out, and he basically said, look, everybody in the UK knows that I don't have a decisive influence in Crystal Palace. He seemed to think that was the crux of the issue. He said, look, they listened to us, they listened to what we had to say, and we've got to wait and see what happens. But then he finished it by saying, that's why I'm trying to sell. And I think the latest story that was out was that he was looking at actually increasing his stake. So I managed to catch him later on and just said, just to double check, John, you say that you're trying to sell, is that right? And he said, yeah, we need to sort this thing out with UEFA. We need to do it for the good of Palace. If that's what the next step is, then this is clearly quite a big deal.
It is a big deal, isn't it, Mike? It's more serious than maybe many thought, maybe many Palace fans might have thought.
Yeah, I think so. All the noises out of Palace, I mean, they wouldn't comment on the record, but all the noises out of the club ahead of the hearing were that they were pretty confident that they could just go in there and say, look, John Textor might have a 43% kind of majority shareholding in the club, but he only has 25% of the voting rights. So you can't say that he is the owner of the club, and because he's got Leon, we should be stopped from playing in the same competition. It's an incredibly complex situation, Jim, because the rules are, there's so much of it. And part of the rules say that, yes, you can't have a majority shareholding, which they'll say, well, he's not got that. But then part of it says you can't have any influence over management, sporting performance, administration. And I think the problem we've got is that this is a guy who has spoken of his frustration at not having the control that he wants. He's tried to increase his stake. So to then turn around and say, it's got nothing to do with Crystal Palace, might be quite a tough argument to make.
Where do you think this goes from here, Mike? Obviously, it's a serious matter, and they've been in front of UEFA. Now what?
Well, he's saying that he's trying to sell it. I think the clock is ticking on this. The fixtures are out for the qualification rounds for the Europa Conference. I think it's June the 17th. So, we're talking less than a fortnight here, Jim. It's rare that you can do your due diligence to effectively buy a majority stake in a football club in 2 weeks. So they're up against it.
It's the second day of the Premier League's AGM today, and yet Steve Parish's attention has been very much on this situation with Textor, with Palace and UEFA. That demonstrates the seriousness of the matter, doesn't it?
Absolutely that. You speak to people who attend these Premier League meetings, and Steve is one of those who is there often, who is often a contributor to those meetings. So to see him there yesterday kind of underlined the importance of this. Sadly, he wasn't up for. He wasn't too keen on talking when I approached him. He wouldn't even look at me. But I get that. It is what it is. This is a tricky situation for them all.
That is what you call good reporting, isn't it? Mike Keegan of the Mail over in Nyon in Switzerland, right on the spot as Parish and Textor arrived for this crunch meeting with UEFA. Simon, you know the situation here, and you, even though it's your club and you've still got huge fondness for it, you're quite relaxed about this at this stage. But as Mike said there, this is a race against time nonetheless for Textor. Yeah, that's why they're there.
Maybe. I'm assuming Leon are rocking up next, are they? I'm assuming they're going to be presenting their case as to the reasons why they should be given some dispensation.
Maybe.
I don't see why this is a Crystal Palace's problem, why it's not a Leon problem. The constitution of Crystal Palace...
But Leon would be given the spot because they finished higher.
But it doesn't matter.
In their table.
If you're both in Europa League, you're both in the Europa League. Palace have qualification criteria for the UK is if you win the FA Cup, you get in the Europa League.
Does he own more of Palace than Leon?
I don't know what his ownership model is in Leon, but irrespective of it, if you've got a majority shareholding in a business, it doesn't matter if you've got 5% more in one business or the other. And also the uniqueness of Crystal Palace, is my understanding of it is that Parish has the casting consideration inside Crystal Palace, and we've seen it manifest itself before, because I think Parish and Textor were odds over the loan system when the Premier League voted against some form of loan mechanism,
right? And
Textor didn't like it and thought that was wrong. And you saw that the constitution of Crystal Palace was slightly different.
Why doesn't Parish buy Textor shares?
Because they haven't got the money to do it.
Right. So what does Textor need to do here? Because they've got to do something.
Well, one of two things, I suspect, like every other owner that's done. This multi-club ownership is a bloody mess. I mean, you either allow people to have multi-club ownership or you don't. And if you allow them to have multi-club ownership, then you have to accept the rigours of the fact that they've got multi-clubs and they might compete in the same competition. Or don't allow it in the first place. Right, so it's all bloody silly. And the fact of the matter is, how many clubs have we seen?
Yeah.
How many individuals have we seen that have parked their shares into trusts to be able to get around it? Marinakis did it 2-3 weeks ago. We saw Marinakis resign from Nottingham Forest as a director and put his shares in Olympiacos or Nottingham Forest in trust. So are you telling me that's beyond the wit of man for John Textor to do the same?
Right, so at Palace, he's a 43% shareholder.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
At Lyon, he owns 78% of the club.
Right. So, but I don't see the difference in the fact that he's still the common denominator. Lyon have the same problem that Crystal Palace have.
But you know about these things. How does this get resolved? If Palace fans are listening to this morning, they aren't in Nyon in Switzerland for no reason, Simon.
Well, I would
They're
be
in front of
surprised.
UEFA yesterday, and a 1 hour meeting turned into a 2 hour meeting.
Because they want to make sure that everyone understands the construct of the organisation and the constitution of Crystal Palace is different. Parish is a very small shareholder in Crystal Palace. He's a big beneficiary of his ownership model of Crystal Palace because he gets paid very well and has been able to sell the shares that he's had over the years to the Americans in various different guises. So, but the constitution of Crystal Palace is like a weighted board. The board is based upon influence, and he has the controlling executive ability to make certain decisions, which will then remove the idea that a majority shareholder has the influence over two football clubs. They can put it, I would assume, I don't believe that Crystal Palace is different to any other football club. If Marinakis can achieve it, if Jim Ratcliffe can achieve it, if other football club owners, Tony Bloom, can achieve it, if they can put their shareholding in other football clubs into some form of trust mechanism, why can't John Textor?
And that in turn buys him time.
Well, it buys them the same outcome as it's bought everybody else. Unless I'm missing something.
Can you then sell them from the trust?
Well, of course you can. In the same way that ultimately it's an asset that someone can buy. Who they buy it from is irrelevant.
Second guess this for me. What will UEFA decide here?
I would imagine they'll find a solution that enables both clubs to play in this competition.
And what is that solution? Because at the moment, Simon, the rules say this can't be done.
Well, I doubt it's going to be that Textor sells his shares. Now, why Textor is going public about certain things and suggesting that he's going to sell it. If he's got a bid on the table to buy his shares, he can put that as further evidence that ultimately he has no controlling influence over Crystal Palace. I don't see this as something that's going to exclude Crystal Palace. I don't think it's Crystal Palace's problem in isolation. Lyon must have the same challenge. Yeah. So why would Palace be the ones that are having to explain themselves more than Lyon? Right. He has a 70-odd% shareholding in Lyon. He has a 43% shareholding in Crystal Palace. And there were a variety of mechanisms and levers that they were able to pull. And one of them will be that they'll make the case, I imagine, that this is not constructed that way. He may be the 43% shareholder in there, but he is not the controlling influence. I am. I'm the controlling influence, and here are the documents supporting that to give you the constitution of Crystal Palace that shows I make all the executive decisions about how we play this football club, how it competes, and how money is spent.
So that would be legally binding then?
Yeah, of course it would. Otherwise, Parish wouldn't be in that position.
Yeah. So depending on how Steve Parish performed yesterday in front of them in Neom, depends on the outcome, really.
Well, surely
if he convinces them yesterday...
it's just about the paperwork
in part, if they say, well, no, we still don't like that because we want to be deliberately difficult about it, then I think the fallback position will be a structuring exercise. And is anybody really going to tell me that Crystal Palace and John Textor is not capable of sophisticating a structuring exercise, which is all crap anyway, like Jim Ratcliffe did, to turn around and say that my shares in Nice, in the eventuality that Nice play in the same competition Man United are in a blind trust. Okay, so what does that mean then? It's like Marinakis. I'm no longer on the board at Nottingham Forest, and I no longer hold the shares in the same way. So when Nottingham Forest haven't got any money next year, who are they going to get the money from? Yeah. You, I suspect. Right. So it's all silly. It's all
Answer me this, though. When that final whistle went at Wembley, will this have crossed Textor's mind?
I don't know. I don't know the fella. I don't know whether it would have crossed...
Would it have crossed yours?
No.
You own a club in France,
instantaneously.
and you've just got yourselves into the Europa League with Palace.
No, I don't think
and
so.
you know the rules.
Somebody probably brought it to his attention before because they knew by winning they'd get in Europe.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they...
Yeah, I mean, listen, these are not fools. Whatever I may or may not think of the individuals concerned, they're not fools.
No.
Sure.
And they will find their way through this.
Danny, I want to put this to you. Job Bellingham.
Yeah.
It would appear that Sunderland are going to pick up £25 million in the process of saying goodbye to Job, brother of Jude, of course, younger brother. And Job is on the brink of completing a move to Borussia Dortmund. And of course, we know that Jude, after leaving Birmingham, went to Borussia Dortmund, and then the rest is history, on to Real Madrid. New country, new language, new experience. Would Job be right to take the tried and tested route that the Bellinghams have had success from?
I think it's a better move for him than staying with Sunderland if that's the only other option, because he's going to be playing in a team that more than likely is going to lose a lot of games and not have the ball very much. Irrelevant of who they sign. Let's be honest.
Right, but the same team in Germany.
Well,
probably with the same people there.
I see the pluses in it rather than the negatives. So he's going to know the city because he'll have been there many times with his brother. They've probably already got property there, which is like a second home that he'll know and be comfortable with. I think he'll be embraced more warmly because it's Jude's brother. I know you'll have to earn your stripes when you start playing, but there's lots of pluses to it, I think. He'll know some of the people at the club already by being around his brother and around the club. His mum or his dad tend to go out with him. I think that's what they've done previously. And as I said, I'm sure they've all probably kept a property there anyway.
Yeah.
So there's lots of good things. And ultimately, if he's going to be playing, which Dortmund do give the youngsters, they don't tend to bring in young players and not play them. He's going to be playing in a team that wins more games than it loses. Attacking football in an amazing stadium, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Incredible fan base.
Yeah.
So what an experience.
Well, he could have gone to Leipzig and he could have gone down to Frankfurt.
Yeah, that's what I thought he was going to Frankfurt.
And I remember at the time, Simon, you quite rightly, in the view of some Sunderland fans, were saying, well, hang on a second. Is he at liberty to go out there and speak to Borussia Dortmund? It would appear, yes, he was.
Yeah.
But is it prudent to go in the same tried and tested way that Jude took?
Well, there'll be a pro and con for it. I mean, his father's no fool, is he? I mean, his father's guided his brother. And I think there's been very few missteps there, is there? I mean, he decided to go from Birmingham, had a chance to go to Man United, walked around their training ground, said, no, thank you, not for me. Went to Dortmund, went from Dortmund to Real Madrid. Not been much of a misstep there, is there?
No.
His brother will travel in his elder brother's footsteps until he steps out of his shadows by being his own man to some extent. If he follows in his footsteps, then he's always going to have that comparison. So he needs to be a player.
But he'll have that comparison wherever he goes.
Well,
because when you watch him, he runs like him, he looks like him.
But he'll have even more.
It's an identity.
He'll have even more of a comparison because there'll be a yardstick to benchmark him against, which is actually at the same club with the same fans, the same perspectives. And they must feel comfortable that that's the right way to go. I mean, he was in the PFA Team of the Year last year in the Championship, which is no mean feat. So he's a decent player. I don't think he is his brother. No. But then, so what? He has to plough his own trough. His father, despite being a bit tricky, I think, in a couple of media interviews recently where he's gotten a bit nasty about people asking which son he's talking about
that.
And being a bit facetious about it.
Yeah.
Matt have some more justification now because the younger brother's now stepping up to the big leagues.
Yeah.
The fact is that it's disappointing for Sunderland. Their reward for getting promoted and celebrating with them as he was on a plane the next morning out to Germany. Can't quite fathom that myself.
Yeah,
but football. My only surprise is
they must be happy with it. Sunderland. It's not for me to be offended on Sunderland's behalf. They must be happy with it.
Yeah, if you're Kittle at Sunderland, you get 25 million all of a sudden from Job.
Yeah.
Is that a nice amount to play with as you head to the Premier League?
I just got 120 million from getting promoted.
Right.
I've got a football. A, I've got plenty of money.
Yeah.
From the family background that I come from. B, I've got a big football club. C, I've spent a lot of time getting this football club out of the miserable doldrums of League One into the Championship and out of the Championship back into the big league.
Yeah.
I've got 125 million quid plus a whole raft of other commercial opportunities that probably means it's worth a best part of $250 million to me.
Yeah.
Well, 25 million quid, fantastic, I'll take it, but I've got to redeploy it. Can I buy a better player than Joe Bellingham for 25 million quid?
I read, Danny, that he had a £33 million release clause.
Okay.
But if they got promoted, then Kirill would accept 25 million and wish him well on his way.
Well, there you go. Then.
Right, okay. So the reward for success is you get penalised.
My only thing is that
I don't think you would have done that. Would you?
Was there another Premier League club as an option for him? Because from a footballing point of view, I would, depending on which Premier League club, I think that would be probably more beneficial.
Where did they sign him from? They didn't. Did they sign him? They didn't sign him from Birmingham, did they?
They did.
They did sign it from Birmingham.
Yeah, they were both there, weren't
yes.
they? Yeah.
So everybody's going to probably do well
for £3 million quid.
So everyone's there's probably a sell-on for Birmingham, so they're going to get a drink out of it. And Sunderland, well, look.
Job's only 19.
Yeah, I mean, how long? His brother was, what, 17, 18 when he went to Dortmund? So if you're good enough, you're old enough.
I interviewed Jude down at the Den when he played a blinder for Birmingham, and he was 16 then.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Look, the reality is he's not going to be Jude. Jude's a generation.
And the question is, if you follow the same footsteps, you're going to have to be something vaguely resembling it.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be the run.
But he's not going to be Jude.
Right.
And the question that Jim's framing it is it a bad thought process to naturally continue that process of comparison by actually trying to follow what your brother's doing blow by blow?
As I said earlier when you asked me, it's a better option than staying at Sunderland.
Yeah.
But he had other options in Germany.
But Dortmund's better than Frankfurt. Well,
is it? I suppose it is.
When you think of it,
I think Dortmund know what they're getting, because by God they scored out the Jude situation, and Job is cut of similar cloth.
Well, he's not as productive.
Lightning doesn't strike twice.
He's not as productive in the final third. He's a bit different in that respect, but he's a super talented lad.
Yeah.
The reality is Dortmund is when you go there and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, Frankfurt's a big club, of course it is.
Yeah.
And even Leipzig to a degree. But if you were looking at the three, Dortmund's the obvious one. My curiosity is around, was there a Premier League club option at that price? I think there must have been.
Yeah.
And who was it? And would have that been a better option?
Sure.
But he was on a plane out the door the next day, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we were reporting on the Monday after the Sunderland playoff one. He was in Germany.
That's right.
Well, if you're wanted by someone, it feels good.
Yeah.
If they really wanted him and they rolled out the red carpet to get him there, you feel good about
it. It's like him and I every Wednesday. You're wanted by us.
Thank you.
No problem. So Jude was there, and it worked out nicely for him. Now Job is heading out, and it seems like Borussia Dortmund is the destination. Once that happens, we'll bring you confirmation of it.